Today we're going to take a look at a piece of art history. We're not going to get too deep into anything. In this video, we just want to go through some fun facts and quirky events from art history. In every episode of this channel, we open a new window into the history of art and dive into the wild stuff that happened. This episode is all about 35 interesting facts from the history of art. Art history is full of tales and wonders, and we owe that to the weird, eccentric, radical, and totally genius people who paved the way in the art world. Honestly, we could have come up with 100 of these facts, but we randomly picked these 30. All right, let's get into it. Rembrandt, the famous painter of the Dutch Golden Age, you probably know his painting The Night Watch, was so poor by the time he died, he couldn't even afford a headstone. He was buried in an unmarked grave in a church in Amsterdam. Primavera, Spring, by Sandro Botticelli features at least 138 identifiable plant species, all painted with incredible botanical precision. Andy Warhol, king of pop art, and his mom Julia kept a colony of cats in their New York apartment. 25 of them were named Sam. What a crazy guy. In 1952, this mother and son duo even published a book together, a quirky little thing called 25 Cats Named Sam and One Blue Cat. If you look at the title, there's actually a grammatical error. That's because Warhol's mom, who went by the name Valky, wasn't super fluent in English. And when she first wrote the title, they just decided to go with it because it was cute. But the funnier part, the book only shows 16 cats, not 25. Gustav Klimt, who you probably know from The Kiss, was a cat lover too. He let them roam freely around his studio. Here's the weird part. He apparently used their urine as a color fixative. Van Gogh. He hated the Starry Night. Painted it while he was in a French asylum, not long after cutting off his ear. In his letters, he wrote that the composition was a total failure, said it had nothing to say. But here's the wild twist. He had no idea that he was intuitively painting a complex phenomenon known as turbulence. A phenomenon that wasn't scientifically defined until 1941 by a mathematician named Andrei Kolmogorov. In 2004, NASA's Space Telescope captured a light echo 20,000 light years away that reminded scientists of the swirling patterns in Starry Night. What's even crazier, there's a clear link between Van Gogh's urge to paint turbulent skies and the peaks of his own mental turbulence. But here's the flip side. Van Gogh claimed he felt totally calm while painting his self-portrait with bandaged ear and pipe. Still, it's obvious that many of his works were created in periods of intense emotional and psychological stress. Katsushika Hokusai, the Japanese printmaker behind the iconic Great Wave off Kanagawa, had over 30 different names during his life. More than 30, actually. Every time he switched artistic styles or entered a new phase in his life, he picked a new name. That kind of identity shifting was pretty normal in Japanese culture, but no one did it as obsessively as Hokusai. Apparently, he hated cleaning so much that his studio would get absolutely filthy and dusty. When it got unbearable, he wouldn't clean it, he'd just move. How many times did he do that? 93. Yup, 93 times he moved just to avoid cleaning. Ancient Greek and Roman statues, those classical ones you see in museums, were originally painted in bright colors. But in the Middle Ages, people stripped off the paint. So by the time the Renaissance artists saw them, they were all white. And because Renaissance folks idolized the ancients, they copied what they thought was the original look, plain white marble. So the idea that real art is colorless, it's actually based on a huge misunderstanding. In 1964, Salvador Dali worked with Disney to create a short animation. Dali working with Disney. The project was shelved, but in 1999, over a decade after Dali's death, the project was revived. Back then, Dali had worked with Disney animator John Hench. At age 90, Hench came back to finish the short film they'd started over 50 years earlier. It was under 7 minutes long and finally released in 2003 under the title Destino. Salvador Dali was full of phobias, including a deep fear of female genitalia, castration, and grasshoppers. He was born 9 months after his older brother died, also named Salvador. His parents told him he was the reincarnation of his dead brother, and Dali believed it well into adulthood. Dante Gabriel Rossetti, a 19th century English poet and painter, believed the same thing, that he was the reincarnation of William Blake. And funnily enough, Blake had died exactly 9 months before Rossetti was born. Rossetti married Elizabeth Siddal, the same artist who inspired the famous painting Ophelia. Tragically, just like the drowning Ophelia in the painting, Siddal ended her life at 32. The massive altarpiece, Ghent altarpiece by Jan van Eyck, and his brother Hubert has been burned, chopped up, and stolen numerous times. 13 major crimes have been recorded against it, including 6 successful thefts by Napoleon's army and later by Hitler. In 1934, a panel from the altarpiece disappeared and is still missing to this day. Quick side note before we move on to the next fact. We really care about making these videos fun but informative with solid research behind them. So please help us out by liking and subscribing to this channel. Thanks for supporting us. Okay, back to it. In 1924, an American literary scholar named Paul Jordan Smith founded a fictional art movement to expose the emptiness of modernism and ridicule the shallowness of critics who praised it. He was disgusted by what was considered art in the 20th century, so he decided to play a grand joke on the art world. He presented himself as an avant-garde Russian painter named Pavel Jordanovich and created a fake movement called Decembrationism. For 3 years, he successfully trolled the cultural elite. His paintings were clumsy and absurd, with ridiculous titles, but critics still praised them. Some of his works were even exhibited alongside those of genuine independent artists. Eventually, he felt he had made his point or simply grew tired of the joke and published an article in the Los Angeles Times exposing everything. Vasily Kandinsky, the Russian painter and theorist, had synesthesia, a neurological condition where the boundaries between senses are blurred. He could essentially hear colors, which explains the symphonic nature of his work. This is part of why his art is described as being musically inspired, though that's a deeper discussion. Leonardo da Vinci Salvator Mundi sold in 2017 for $450.3 million, making it the most expensive artwork ever sold. Da Vinci was deeply concerned about animal welfare. According to 16th century art historian Giorgio Vasari, Leonardo used to buy caged birds at markets, intended to be killed and eaten just to set them free. Some say he was an ethical vegetarian, although there is no concrete evidence today. At the Louvre Museum, there's a special mailbox where people from around the world send letters addressed to the Mona Lisa. Her fame skyrocketed over time. Before joining the Louvre's collection in 1804, the painting was supposedly hung in the bathroom of King Francis I of France and later kept in Napoleon's bedroom until the early 19th century. But her global fame truly exploded in 1911 when she was stolen from the Louvre. Do you know who was the main suspect? Pablo Picasso. At the time, he was a young artist from Spain and part of a rebellious group of artists. One member of the group had previously stolen other artworks from the Louvre and sold 2 of them to Picasso. That's how Picasso ended up being interrogated in court. But it turned out the Mona Lisa was stolen by a Louvre employee and Picasso was cleared. Italian Baroque painter Caravaggio killed a man named Tomasoni, who was a sex worker's pimp. In Rome, he spent the rest of his short life in exile, always on the run from a death sentence. Francisco Goya, the Spanish painter, also spent the final years of his life in self-imposed exile. One of the favorite painting spots of Georgia O'Keeffe, the famous flower painter, was inside her old Ford car. She used it as shelter from the blazing desert sun and painted right inside it. In 1957, French artist Yves Klein of the Nouveau Realism movement developed a specific shade of ultramarine blue and registered it as International Klein Blue, IKB. It became a major part of his artistic identity and featured heavily in his work. In 1964, Sonia Delaunay became the first living woman artist to have a retrospective at the Louvre, an honor never before given to a woman. John Singer Sargent, the famous portrait artist, painted a wealthy woman named Virginie Amélie Avegno-Gautreau in 1884 and displayed it at the Paris Salon. The painting was scandalous because one strap of her dress had slipped off her shoulder. Sargent later repainted that part and kept the work private for 30 years before selling it to the Metropolitan Museum in New York. He wrote, "I think this is the best thing I have ever done," but requested it be exhibited under the title Madame X to protect the woman's reputation. Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth was inspired by his neighbor, Anna Christina, who suffered from a condition that paralyzed her lower body. Refusing to use a wheelchair, she moved by dragging herself with upper body strength. Wyeth described the painting as a tribute to a triumph of the human spirit over a life most people would consider hopeless. Frida Kahlo was born in 1907, but insisted on saying she was born in 1910 to align with the start of the Mexican Revolution. She was very politically active. In 1961, Henri Matisse's painting The Boat was accidentally hung upside down at the Museum of Modern Art in New York for 47 days. Thousands of visitors saw it, including Matisse's own son, without noticing. Eventually, a stockbroker realized that the reflection in the water looked more complex than the boat itself, something unlikely from Matisse. He checked the exhibition catalog and discovered the mistake. In 1877, when Auguste Rodin presented his hyper-realistic sculpture, The Age of Bronze, people were so shocked by its lifelike quality that they accused him of casting it directly from a living person's body, something frowned upon at the time. Jean-Michel Basquiat, the iconic New York artist, was expelled from high school for throwing a pie at the principal. After that, he started creating postcards with cryptic symbols and phrases and sold them on the streets. In 1980, when he saw Andy Warhol in a restaurant, he boldly approached him and asked him to buy one, which sparked their legendary friendship and collaboration. And that's it, 35 quirky and fascinating facts from art history. If you're curious to know more about any of these facts, let us know. We're also working on episodes about Frida Kahlo's life, the mystery of the Mona Lisa, Japanese art, and Hokusai's work, and Francisco Goya's journey. If you like this style of content, tell us. We'll keep creating more fun art facts.